Good morning. Subcommittee will come to order. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. Today, the Aviation Subcommittee is holding the second of its hearings in the 115th Congress in preparation for the FAA reauthorization. As all of you know, the focus of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee this year is building a 21st century infrastructure for America. Today, we will be looking at the current state of our nation's airports and their role in the 21st century transportation network. Airports are the most visible piece of physical infrastructure in the air transportation system and the place where all flights begin and end. More than 800 million passengers pass through our nation's 509 commercial service airports and U.S. carriers each year, a figure that is projected to grow to 1 billion within 10 years. Our nation is home to three of the 10 busiest airports in terms of passengers, and 8 of the 10 busiest airports ranked by the number of aircraft operations. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport tops both categories, earning the title of the world's busiest airport by any measure. Our nation's airport infrastructure is not limited to just passenger service airports. It also includes small general aviation airports that are located in every congressional district. I have 5 in my own district. These airports may be small, but they play a vital role in connecting remote communities, providing emergency services, fostering small business development, and teaching a new generation how to fly. No other country supports its airport infrastructure to the degree and scope that we do here in the United States of America. In partnership with states and municipalities, the federal government supports air infrastructure development in a number of ways, including Airport Improvement Program grants, passenger facility charges, and a favorable tax treatment of airport bonds. Increasingly, however, there is a perception that American airports are falling behind their global competitors. In a 2016 ranking by the Skytrax World Airport Awards, the best performing American airport was Denver International, but only in 28th place. According to a 2015 FAA analysis, 9 of the country's largest airports will be capacity constrained by 2030, even if all planned improvements are implemented. At the other end of the spectrum, available flights to smaller cities and rural communities are declining, decreasing connectivity, and leaving airports with huge maintenance costs for oversized facilities. Not only must Congress be mindful that our nation's airports need to plan for and be capable of handling future passenger growth, but we must remember the needs of smaller communities and those impacted by declining air services. Our panel today represents a broad range of airports in terms of both size and geography. Each airport is also from a state or district represented by the Aviation Subcommittee, and each witness brings a unique perspective to the state of America's airports. I look forward to their testimony on how Congress can help facilitate the building of a 21st century aviation infrastructure. Before recognizing Mr. Larson for his remarks, I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing, and unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Now I'd like to yield to Mr. Larson. Rick, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chairman Lobiondo, for calling today's hearing on the state of U.S. airports. As we confront the FAA reauthorization this year, this hearing provides an opportunity for us to better understand how Congress can help airports satisfy their growing capital needs and keep pace with progress abroad. First and foremost, I want to welcome a fellow Washingtonian as part of today's panel of witnesses. Mr. Lance Little is Managing Director of SeaTac, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, which many of my constituents, as well as tens of millions of others each year, rely on for air travel. I look forward to hearing from him today, in particular about the needs and challenges SeaTac faces as it undergoes its own long-term capital improvement plan to modernize facilities, alleviate congestion, which I know is a serious issue at SeaTac, as well as to improve the customer experience. Each year, nearly 800 million passengers board aircraft in the United States, with approximately 70,000 commercial and GA flights taking off daily. FAA's most recent forecast projects the number of commercial enplanements in the U.S. alone will reach more than 1 billion a year by 2036. So it should come as no surprise then that the U.S. is home to 4 of the world's 10 busiest airports. And in total, the U.S. has over 19,000 airports, ranging from the world's busiest to small general aviation airfields across the country. And forecasts of increasing air travel may seem encouraging for the U.S. economy, but without adequate investment in airports, passengers will experience congestion, delays, and the U.S. will miss out on economic opportunities. The nation's top airports will continue reaching higher levels of congestion unless airports add new capacity and manage overcrowding. For many years, Chairman Lobiando and I have called for the modernization of the air transportation system. This includes encouraging immediate implementation of next-gen priorities. Improve surface operations to reduce time spent taxiing between gate and runway, and improve flight routes and procedures are just 2 of the priorities, along with added capacity that will be critical as air travel increases. But as the airport manager in Arthur Haley's 1968 novel Airport remarked, a book I'm sure we've all read, "We may have broken the sound barrier, but we have not broken the ground barrier." That was true in 1968. It is true today. Congress has long recognized a federal role with respect to investing in our aviation infrastructure, the airport improvement program, and authorizing passenger facility charges. Unfortunately, airport capital needs significantly exceed available funding through these 2 mechanisms. The FAA estimates that over the next 5 years, airports will need $32.5 billion for AIP-eligible airport capital projects alone, amounting to about $6 billion per year. These numbers are even more startling when we add in the non-AIP-eligible projects. A leading airport association estimates the airports will need more than $100 billion over the next 5 years for all airport capital projects. The math says it's about $20 billion a year. Congress has fallen short of providing $3.35 billion in AIP funding annually, and the current PFC, currently capped at $450, generates only about $3 billion per year. So even with airports' ability to raise revenues through PFCs, there's still a significant gap between the available funding and the investment needed for critical safety and capacity projects. We need to make headway on these funding shortfalls in order to make U.S. airports more efficient and more competitive. And so what I expect to glean from today's hearing is that this committee must encourage investment at airports, large and small, and keep airport funding in mind in the development of a long-term comprehensive FAA reauthorization bill this year. So I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses, but especially the one from SeaTac, about the status of our airport infrastructure and ideas for continued investment now and into the future. Thank you. I yield back.
All right, thank you, Mr. Larson. Chairman Schuster.
Thank you, Chairman Lobiando, and Ranking Member Larson. Thanks for having this hearing today. Welcome to all of our witnesses. Talked about a lot of big airports, but nobody's mentioned the most important airport in the country, and that's the Altoona Blair County Airport. So for those of you that don't know it, it's a great little airport. And I mention that because it is my favorite airport, number one. But number two, it's a small rural airport. So some of you may have heard I want to do some reforming to the FAA. Some I would call it transformational. But I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm not going to forget about small airports, medium-sized airports, all the airports. They're important to the system, and it's an important piece of infrastructure that we've got to pay attention to. Now, the second most important airport is here today, represented by Christina Casodas. I've been practicing. Christine hasn't been on the job long, 2 years, but just, I guess was it last month? Yes, last month. Pittsburgh was named the Airport of the Year by the Transport World magazine, so it's a great airport. Number 2 in my heart, but still in my heart. I appreciate the fact that we're holding these hearings because aviation is so vital to this country, and I, for one, believe the FAA needs to be reformed significantly, not only from the air traffic control system, but the certification process that's so important to manufacturing in this country. But having these hearings, bringing people from around the country together to talk about their piece of the infrastructure is incredibly important. I can't be more pleased than coming off the last night's speech by the President. Talked about a lot of things that I agree with, but he talked about infrastructure. As I've mentioned before, it's the first president that I can look back into history that used the word infrastructure in his inaugural address. And as you know, he flies around in an airplane. Now he's got a government airplane, government issue, which I think might be a step down for him. But he uses the airspace. He knows about the airspace. And I've talked to him on a number of occasions about the need to transform aviation, again, across the spectrum. But it's important we have these hearings to educate members. We've got a couple of new members on the committee, but some come to us with a lot of experience in the air. A couple of them own their own planes or fly their own planes or do something with their own planes. So, but again, really appreciate the opportunity to have you folks here in front of us to talk about, again, a critical piece of infrastructure, and look forward to working with each and every one of you and all the committee members as we move forward. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. DeFazio. Peter, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I'm vitally interested in the needs of the airports, particularly their unmet needs, their projections into the future to provide a better travel experience for all Americans, shorten security lines with redesign to accommodate new security measures, et cetera. But in the numerous conversations I've had, a lot of airports are bonded out, they're tapped out. They need a way to finance bonds for the investment they need to make. So I'm pleased today to announce that along with our colleague, Mr. Massey, we've introduced a bill to lift the cap on the passenger facility charge. I have a long history with this. I was the original Democratic sponsor here in the committee. We fenced it so that the abuses of the previous PFC, which Congress had repealed, couldn't happen, which was generating revenues for off-airport activities that didn't go directly to benefit those who use the system. And there have been no scandals, and it's a good system. Those who don't fly, they don't have to pay. It's not coming out of the general fund. Those who do fly benefit from the improvements, and they pay a little bit for a better experience. Now, I know that already I can hear the screams from A4A downtown about how this will cause people to no one will ever get on an airplane again if you raise the PFC $2. Now, it's interesting. My staff did a little math. Last year with bag fees, and you average out among every person who flew, $8.50 per passenger for everybody who flew last year in bag fees. But that doesn't deter anybody from flying. $50 to put your bag in the overhead? Oh, thank you very much. I love the experience. What they're really worried about is that you might build more gates and expand your terminals, and we might have some more competition. That's what they're really worried about, and it's time to get past this and get real and allow the airports to fund. The president has said he wants to rebuild our airports. They're horrible. They are, in many cases. He talked in particular about LaGuardia. But he also had reservations about fees. But what is better than a user fee for the users of the system to pay? So I'm not going to go into great depths. Already my colleague from Washington State has mentioned it. But, we can do everything. The chairman and I have some agreement over reforms that need to be made, not the form of the reforms, but at the FAA. But as former Administrator Randy Babbitt said, let's do everything we can with NextGen, but if you look at LaGuardia, you can't land more than one plane on a single runway every 54 seconds. So unless we do things to actually enhance the ground capacity of the system, to move people through the airports in a better experience more quickly, to provide more gates at airports, to provide more runways, it doesn't matter what you do with putting planes any way you want in the sky. They've got to go someplace. I mean, gee, you get there and, oh, there's the Greyhound bus station that I'm going to stumble through. It's not a comprehensive way of approaching the problem. So yes, let's do what we need to do to make the FAA better procurement, personnel, and other issues, but let's also allow the critical component of this system to grow into a 21st century form to accommodate current and future needs of passengers. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. DeFazio. At this time, I'd like to recognize Congresswoman Johnson to introduce one of our guests.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to you for calling the hearing. As we convene this morning to discuss the state of American airports, I can think of no better witness to testify than Mr. Sean Donahue, the Chief Executive Officer at DFW Airport, that's Dallas-Fort Worth. Mr. Donahue is a great partner, and I'm very appreciative of his willingness to testify before the committee today. He brings with him more than 3 decades of experience in the airline industry. He has previously served as the Chief Operating Officer of Virgin Australian Airlines, and prior to that, he climbed the ranks over a 25-year career at United Airlines, first as an accounting clerk and ending as a senior vice president of operations. Today, we're extremely fortunate to have Mr. Donahue oversee all the operations of the greatest airport in the country, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, as CEO. The airport, and you know, Texans always want you to know we have the best. The airport itself is a massive complex sprawled over nearly 30 square miles and 5 terminals. DFW ranks as the 10th busiest airport in the world by passenger traffic and the 3rd busiest airport in the world by aircraft movement. Last year alone, DFW Airport achieved another record by serving more than 65 million passengers. We are extremely fortunate to have Mr. Donahue at the helm to continue DFW's legacy as a premier large hub airport. With that, I'm proud to introduce Mr. Sean Donahue to the committee with full confidence that his testimony and insight today. I'll yield back the balance of my time, but before I do, I want to say that I truly support the passenger facility fee. We can use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Our next witnesses are Mr. Lance Little, Managing Director of Aviation Division of the Port of Seattle, Ms. Christina Casotis, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Allegheny County Airport Authority, and Mr. Lou Bleiweiss, who's the Executive Director of the Greater Asheville Regional Airport Authority. And now I'd like to recognize Ms. Brownlee to introduce one of our guests.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the proud representative of Ventura County, California, I am very, very pleased to introduce my constituent, Todd McNamee. Todd currently serves as Director of Airports for Ventura County, where he oversees operations at the Camarillo and Oxnard airports, 2 of the greatest airports in the country. Todd is also a pilot. Todd was elected as Secretary-Treasurer of the American Association of Airport Executives for 2016 through 2017. He is also past President of the Southwest Chapter of AAAE. Early in his career, Todd worked on unmanned aircraft systems for several private sector companies. Since I came to Congress, Todd has been an invaluable resource for me, not only on local issues impacting the general aviation community, but also on national policy, including unmanned aerial systems, airport financing, and FAA policy. Todd really understands aviation issues inside and out, and I appreciate that he is joining us here today. I am very proud to represent him and to introduce him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Brownlee. I'd like to remind all of our witnesses to please try to limit their opening remarks to no more than 5 minutes. Mr. Donahue, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, and Congresswoman Johnson, I just want to say thank you for the long-standing support and partnership of DFW. We're most grateful. Chairman Lobiando, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Members Larson and DeFazio, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, good morning. I'd like to also recognize another friend of DFW Airport, Congressman Blake Farenthold, who is a great supporter as well. On behalf of the nearly 2,000 employees who work for DFW Airport and the more than 50,000 men and women who work for an airline, a business, or operational partner, it's my pleasure to be here today to testify before you on the state of American airports, specifically the large hubs that are at the heart of our industry. This hearing is an important step in shaping the way forward for our nation's airports, airlines, and most importantly, passengers. There is a saying in our industry, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. Each airport is a unique entity with its own benefits, challenges, and characteristics. As you consider today's testimony and potentially develop plans for greater investment in airports, please keep our needs in mind. While some airports need new runways, others need new towers or terminals. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach to addressing aviation infrastructure. As Congresswoman Johnson mentioned, DFW is the third largest airport in the world in terms of operations, number 10 in terms of passengers, but probably most importantly to the region, we deliver $37 billion in annual economic activity to the North Texas region. We connect Dallas-Fort Worth to 150 cities in the United States and nearly 60 business centers around the world. Aviation has truly made the world a smaller place. In the 9 hours it takes to drive from DFW to El Paso, you can fly across the Atlantic to London with time to spare. Large hub airports like DFW, which account for 73% of total customer traffic in the country, have needs that are truly supersized. For example, building and improving terminals, a necessity for the long-term success of an airport, are not just simple construction projects. They are multi-year ventures entailing billions of dollars of costs. Airport financing remains the most significant issue we are facing today. Airports owned by state or local governments are required to be self-sustaining as possible and receive little or no taxpayer support. To that end, we must operate like a business, funding operations from revenue and strategically planning funding for major improvement projects, which are, to say the least, incredibly expensive. Airports, capital markets, the airlines, and passengers provide funds to help pay for these long-term projects. Utilizing a combination of airline fees, the passenger facility charge, airport improvement program grants, critical municipal bonds, and commercial revenues, airports must cobble together enough funding to build the massive infrastructure needed to keep our industry moving at peak efficiency. But even the healthiest of airports have found their revenues stretched to keep up with the ever-growing needs of the traveling public and aviation industry. Indeed, as Congressman Larson mentioned, we are looking at about $100 billion in the next 4 or 5 years in infrastructure needs throughout the United States. These are not cosmetic projects designed to put a new shiny look on our airports, but the necessary developments required to keep up with an ever-growing and changing aviation industry. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention the fundamental priority airports place on safety and security when it comes to infrastructure. DFW operates on 17,000 acres, an area roughly the size of Manhattan. Any new building, runway, or even a parking garage can only move ahead when proper security investments are made. It is a significant part of any discussion and an equally significant investment. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. Mr. Little, you are recognized for your statement.
Thank you, Subcommittee Chairman Lobiando, Subcommittee Ranking Member Larson, Chairman Schuster, and Ranking Member DeFazio, and members of the subcommittee for your leadership and for inviting me to testify today. It's an honor to be here. I would like to specifically recognize and thank Representative Larson for his leadership and support of Washington State. My name is Lance Little. I'm the Managing Director, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. My remarks this morning are focused on the challenge that we face at SeaTac in creating the needed facilities to support our rapid growth. 2016 marked the 6th year in a row of record growth at SeaTac. We serve 45 million passengers, and we are now the 9th busiest airport in the U.S. At SeaTac, we're proud of our growth because it reflects the increase in economic vitality and global relevance of the Puget Sound region and Washington State. Our essential mission at the airport is to avoid being a choke point. To achieve this, SeaTac is currently investing more than $3.2 billion over the next 8 years. Concurrently, we are updating our 20-year master plan with a forecast that indicates SeaTac will serve 66 million annual passengers by 2034. At this point, we anticipate our capital expenditures to accommodate this growth will cost at least $10 billion in addition to our current capital plan. I would like to share with the subcommittee how we approach this massive investment challenge and how we evaluate the 4 available revenue options. First is airport net operating income. Per FAA guidelines, aeronautical revenues are set to recover cost, and so effectively all net operating income at SeaTac is generated from non-aeronautical sources. While this is a critical source of revenue, it is not sufficient to meet our capital needs. Second is the Federal Airport Improvement Program. While I'm sure all of today's panelists would welcome as much direct federal investment as possible, the reality is that fewer of these scarce dollars are available, and they are limited to uses that do not include some of our biggest terminal investment needs. Third, the Port of Seattle has limited property taxing authority, but it would be highly inequitable to require King County taxpayers, including the majority that never use the airport, to pay for facilities used by travelers from all over the world. The fourth option is passenger facility charge. The decision about whether to charge a PFC user fee is truly a local decision and impacts only those passengers that utilize the airport facilities. This allows airport governing bodies to encourage competition amongst carriers, secure capacity increases, and support economic growth through passenger direct investment in local airport infrastructure. As public institutions accountable to local voters, airports balance the very real need to keep costs low while ensuring that aviation-specific infrastructure meets regional demand. Unfortunately, the outdated federal cap on the PFC prevents airports like SeaTac from setting a rate that makes the most sense for our airport. Because our existing capital plan will essentially use all SeaTac's anticipated PFC collections through 2035 and most PFC collections through 2047, there will be little available PFC capacity to pay for the billions in projects identified in our master plan. Without additional PFC authority, our debt service on the bonds to fund master plan projects will flow directly into the airline rate base, likely driving costs to airlines at SeaTac to the highest in the nation. This would make SeaTac less competitive as a gateway and put airline service at risk. While an uncapped PFC would give us the authority to raise the fee, that decision would have to be balanced with the need to keep our costs competitive with other U.S. airports and subject to the approval of our local elected officials. I should mention that increased investment flexibility also allows us to address the greatest challenge facing U.S. airports: security. Airports have increasingly become targets, and infrastructure development is a key part of the solution. Our commissioners and our staff are committed to being the most efficient and customer service-focused airport in the country while being a leader in growing responsibly and helping our residents benefit from our growth. In closing, SeaTac International Airport sees the federal government and Congress as essential partners. By granting us local authority on PFCs, greater tools and flexibility in addressing community impact, and greater investment in security, you will help us once again make America's airport the envy of the world. Finally, I'd like to thank Representative DeFazio and Massey for introducing legislation to uncap the PFC. Your leadership is appreciated and essential. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Little, for your testimony. Ms. Casotis, you are recognized for your statement.
Thank you, Chairman Lobiando, Ranking Member Larson, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me to provide infrastructure needs about the medium-sized airports and the funding challenges that we face. The way the airline industry serves Pittsburgh and many other medium-sized communities in the U.S. has gone through a major transformation. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Raleigh-Durham, Nashville, Memphis, and Milwaukee are among the airports that used to carry millions of passengers a year. And many of those passengers are now gone because the hubs are gone, but our infrastructure remains. None of us got to declare bankruptcy. We have been paying down the debt on these facilities for more than a decade, and our current carriers are stuck paying for oversized space. The Pittsburgh terminal, which was designed and sized to accommodate 32 million passengers a year, now accommodates just over 8. We have been good stewards of public money, prudently managing finances to prioritize debt repayment and we have done everything we can to stay competitive in a global market. And yet each of us is left with a large number of capital projects that we have had to defer and infrastructure needs totaling billions. At Pittsburgh International, just in deferred maintenance, we have over $74 million worth of projects. St. Louis has $87 million and Cincinnati $80 million. Our cost structures have radically changed over the past 2 decades, but federal funding mechanisms remain unchanged. Medium-sized airports are getting hammered in the current funding framework. Small airports are funded at the highest AIP levels. Large hub airports get the least because what they don't get in AIP, they make up for in PFCs. But we should be in the middle, and we're not. We're funded at the same discounted levels as the large hub airports. In order to address infrastructure needs at many medium-sized airports, we need to modernize and upgrade costly, inefficient, oversized, and out-of-date facilities, none of which is a priority in the current funding rules. We see 5 areas that need to be addressed. First, the significant contribution requirement should be eliminated from PFC funding criteria for medium-sized airports. That requirement prioritizes capacity enhancement, air safety and security, increasing carrier competition, and reducing congestion or noise. These are not our issues. It has been challenging, if not elusive, for large and medium hub airports, even with airline support, to convince the FAA that preserving capacity and infrastructure makes a significant contribution. Second, medium-sized airports should not be required to take the same AIP haircut as large airports do. Medium-sized airports must be grouped differently because our reality is different. In 17 years of Pittsburgh's PFC program, we have foregone $95 million in AIP entitlement grants. Third, the PFC, which I'm happy to hear today, must be raised or uncapped. It has not kept pace with inflation, leaving us financially challenged. For Pittsburgh, due to the legacy airline debt from the abandoned hub, the authority has dedicated most of its PFC revenue to reduce debt since 2001. Fourth, the FAA must discontinue its arbitrary restriction on AIP and PFC eligible projects. The types of programs that qualify for funding should be expanded. And lastly, we'd like to see regulations reduced. Current regulations seek a 30% design completion completion in order to leverage federal money, which is an unnecessary and onerous undertaking for cash-strapped medium-sized airports. Airports of our size have come a long way on our own, cutting costs and sweating our assets by increasing non-aeronautical revenue in creative and innovative ways. But we need your help to move the needle further. Investing our fair share of federal resources back into medium-sized communities is a game changer for our airports, the country's aviation system. Otherwise, we stay stuck in the catch-22 we're in today. We need to invest in our facilities to keep them cost competitive, to attract the type of air service that allows our communities to grow. But because we don't meet the capacity enhancement requirement, our airports don't get funded, and our airline partners and we end up paying to maintain old, oversized, and underutilized space. We've had a lot of recent success in Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh and airports like us can do more and must do more for our regional economies. By focusing on streamlining processes, the federal government can ensure that we as medium-sized airports can streamline our footprints, stay competitive, and the communities we serve can prosper. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Now we'll turn to Mr. Bleiweiss. Is your microphone on?
Thank you, Chairman Lobiondo and Ranking Member Larson and the members of the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Aviation. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this important hearing. I'm Lou Bleiweiss, Executive Director of the Asheville Regional Airport in Western North Carolina. We served just over 826,000 passengers in 2016, which makes it the 3rd straight year of record-setting numbers. I'm here today representing the small and non-hub classifications of the country's commercial service airports, including Asheville Regional Airport. While the small and non-hub airports only account for 11.8% of the national passenger traffic, we make up 89% of the commercial service airports in this country. I will briefly touch on items that have an overwhelming impact on the smaller airports. Based on Airports Council International North America's biannual infrastructure needs survey that will be officially released next week, airports' infrastructure needs for 2017 through 2021, adjusted for inflation, is nearly $100 billion. Small and non-hub airports account for approximately 14% of this total number. Funding for small and non-hub airports is critical, and at the same time limited because AIP entitlement grants and PFC user fee revenue is based on passenger enplanements. The smaller the employment numbers, the lower AIP and PFC funds. We all know that the expense of a capital project does not vary because of the size of an airport. Let me briefly tell you about the major airfield project going on in Asheville. The airport consists of a single runway 8,000 feet in length and serving both commercial and general aviation aircraft. The original airfield is over 50 years old and is coming to the end of its useful life. We had 2 safety deficiencies that were out of compliance with current FAA policies and standards. We presented the redevelopment project to the FAA 8 years ago, and it took 5 years to program and fund the project. Even with that, the FAA required us to phase the approximate $79 million project over 4 years. Capital projects for small airports under AIP are traditionally funded at 90%, with a 10% local match. Currently, our project is only funded at approximately 77%, leaving Asheville to fund approximately $18 million. We have been able to increase our fund balance over several years to cover the project, but it's been at the expense of deferring other capital aviation projects. During this same time, our parking availability reached capacity, and we had to move forward several years earlier than anticipated with the construction of a $21 million parking garage. Due to the lack of full funding on the airfield redevelopment project, the airport was forced to go into debt for the parking garage. A modernized PFC would allow us to recoup our costs for the airfield project sooner and would have provided us with more of our own funds to apply towards the garage. The airlines will tell you that they will just pay for it. That's not the case at small and non-hub airports like Asheville. I'm fighting to keep my costs low to maintain service. And if I raise my rates too high to cover capital projects, like my airfield project, they will just move to other airports with lower costs. My story is not dissimilar from the stories of my colleagues, small communities across the country. The choices we make in terms of capital projects and the funding available due to our impacts abilities truly meet our overall infrastructure needs. Congress and the industry must work together to find a sustainable funding solution for the future. That is why our leading airport funding issues this year are removing the outdated federal cap on PFCs and enhancing AIP. Small and non-hub airports have difficulties attracting and maintaining air service for their communities. Carriers decide which communities to serve, leaving many communities with little or no air service. In fact, over the past couple of years, approximately 50 small communities have lost commercial service air service. During a speech late last month, a recently retired airline CEO explained that larger airplanes reduce the fuel cost per seat, meaning that smaller planes servicing smaller airports are becoming harder to justify the economic feasibility, which questions the viability of the smaller airports. All communities, but not specifically smaller communities, benefit economically from a viable airport. An analysis recently conducted based on FAA's economic impact study on commercial aviation in the United States, small and non-hub airports contribute $121 billion economic output, supporting 1.1 million jobs. Locally in Asheville, the Asheville Regional Airport provides 1,700 direct, indirect, and induced jobs while providing $556 million of economic output. The industry must find a way to keep air service inexpensive and available to the majority of the country. Lastly, small and non-hub airports, as with all airports, are required by the FAA to be self-sufficient as possible, and yet the FAA overregulates any airport development on any parcel of land. These onerous requirements, not actually found in federal law, trigger extensive federal environmental analysis, which unduly delays projects and often causes developers to look elsewhere to build their projects. This deprives airports of the ability to compete for development opportunities to generate non-aeronautical revenues, bogs down FAA staff in unnecessary review analysis of project planning, and generates inefficiencies without benefits. We believe the federal government should only impose restrictions based on safety and inefficiency concerns and ensure the fair market value is received for non-aeronautical use of the land. The FAA bureaucracy does not need to get involved in every local use decision at an airport. Congress should encourage and mandate the FAA to limit the statutory requirements so the FAA has a role only with respect to issues affecting the safety, efficiency, or utility of the airport for federal facilities. Thank you for your leadership on these important issues. I look forward to working with you all in the subcommittee to move our airports to the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement, Mr. Bleiweiss. Now we'll turn to Mr. McNamee for your statement.
First, I'd like to thank Congresswoman Brownlee for the kind introduction, and also thank you for your great work for the country and also for Ventura County. Good morning, Chairman Lobiondo, Ranking Member Larson, Chairman Schuster, and Ranking Member DeFazio, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing. It's an honor for me to be with you today. Ventura County operates 2 airports, Camarillo and Oxnard. Camarillo is a general aviation reliever airport that has between 150,000 and 200,000 takeoffs and landings per year. Oxnard is classified as a non-hub commercial service airport. However, after losing commercial air service in 2010 it functions as a general aviation airport today. Investing in general aviation airports and promoting the general aviation industry pays big dividends. The Camarillo and Oxnard airports provide $244 million annually in positive economic benefit to the local community and supports over 1,400 jobs. Overall, general aviation contributes $219 billion in total economic activity and supports 1.1 million jobs. Our facilities are critical links for our communities to regional and national economies. This committee can help general aviation and commercial service airports build a 21st century infrastructure by providing them with the resources they need to repair aging facilities and advance critical safety, security, and capacity projects. As you prepare to consider an FAA reauthorization bill, I urge you to take 2 steps that would improve the state of America's airports. First, increase federal funding through the Airport Improvement Program. AIP is a key source of revenue for all sizes of airports. Today, airports only receive enough federal funds to cover half of their eligible projects. An AIP increase would help airports like ours in Ventura County, where we're planning to use federal funds to rehabilitate and reconstruct runways and taxiways at both airports with an estimated cost of $30 million. Second, and as my colleagues have mentioned, eliminate the outdated federal cap on local passenger facility charges. Eliminating the PFC cap is the easiest way to build critical airport infrastructure projects at commercial service airports without putting a heavy burden on the federal budget and is aligned with the administration's plan for infrastructure spending. I want to thank Ranking Member DeFazio and Congressman Massey for introducing legislation earlier today to eliminate the cap on local PFCs. We look forward to working with you and the committee in support of this important measure. Although general aviation airports don't collect PFCs, we benefit from commercial service airports that do. As mentioned, large airports that collect PFCs give back a large share of their AIP entitlements. The FAA then distributes a vast majority of those funds to general aviation and small commercial service airports like those in Ventura County. Eliminating the PFC cap could open the door to focus limited AIP funds on smaller airports that need federal assistance the most. This committee also has a strong track record of supporting the Contract Tower program. I urge you to continue to protect this valuable program, which allows Oxnard and 252 other airports to have cost-effective air traffic control services that enhance aviation safety while saving the FAA approximately $200 million per year. Finally, I would like to thank this committee for addressing the challenges related to unmanned aircraft systems. Safely integrating UAS into the National Airspace System will be a key component of a 21st century aviation system. In Ventura County, we operate a small UAS on behalf of the airport under the recently enacted FAA Part 107 regulations. We hope to be a model example for the rest of the country on how to safely integrate and operate small UAS on and around the airport. Thank you again for inviting me to participate in today's hearing. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Chairman Schuster for any questions he may have.
Thank you. My line of question, I don't think there's any debate that we need more investment in our infrastructure. The President put an exclamation point on that last night, and aviation is no different. One of the things, though, sometimes I think we lack in this discussion about funding is how do we reform the system? How do we make it better so we can build bridges and roads faster, so we can deploy those dollars when it comes to rebuilding our airports and expanding them? I look at the wall there, and there's 5 people up there in the last 30 years that have been involved in reforming the FAA. And I don't want to be too critical because I know one may charge through the door and take me on, another one may call me, so I got to be careful. So I'd rather turn it to you folks at the tables there today to tell me what, dealing with the FAA, and Mr. Bly, you addressed it directly, so I'll let you sit out this one. But dealing with the FAA, how do we reform them so that when you're doing those projects, you can get it done faster? And there's billions of dollars out there right now in airports, but pipelines, railroad projects, that we got a government agency up here that's making it extremely difficult to move these projects forward. So can you address, let's start first with Dallas-Fort Worth, and then we'll go to my second favorite airport, Pittsburgh. So tell me what we can do to make the FAA more responsive to you, get these projects done, to save you money, I would assume.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Schuster. When it comes to the FAA, DFW supports reform and modernization, But before I comment on that, I think it's critical to talk about the safety aspect, and sometimes that does not get enough attention as we talk about the FAA, and from all perspectives, airports, airlines, the FAA, the controllers, the NTSB, everybody involved in the safe operation of the FAA does a great job, and we never want to take our eye off that ball, and I know we all agree on that. In terms of modernization, anything we can do as an aviation industry to drive more efficiency, to drive more funding certainty, DFW would support. And as discussions move forward, I think it's just critical that airports are at the table, and we can offer a perspective. I think we can offer a lot of value, and we would welcome that opportunity.
Ms. Casotis, can you respond to one thing in particular about certainty? How important is certainty to your projects?
It's as important as certainty is to the airlines and the rates and charges. The last thing that the airlines want from us is any volatility in their rates and charges from one year to the next. And for us, in funding, certainty is that critical, because we can make plans about what we need to do in order to better position ourselves to do what we're supposed to do for these communities. And listening to Sean talking about reform and modernization, you know, we're not one of the airport categories that would necessarily be the most obvious beneficiaries, but we are the spokes in the hub and spoke systems. And when the hubs get backed up, we're the ones who suffer. So we are all in favor of the FAA continuing to do what it does well, which is safety oversight, and having the rest of the FAA focus on a more streamlined approach to getting work done. So yes, incredibly important. Thank you.
And Mr. McNamee, General Aviation Airport, again, you have to deal with the FAA when you're doing any sort of projects. Is that accurate?
We do.
And what's been your experiences? Has it been difficult,
So,
easy?
you know, in our local region in the Los Angeles Airport District Office, we have wonderful staff there. But, you know, whether you're doing a project at a general aviation airport or at a large hub airport, the time it takes, the resources, the manpower, and in some cases even the funding, it's the same at my airport that it might be at DFW. And so streamlining some of those processes when it comes to grant funding would certainly be helpful. A bigger picture, moving forward with the implementation of NextGen. One thing for general aviation airports and smaller commercial service airports, or I guess non-primary entitlements, at $150,000, you really can't get that much done. And if you look at some of our projects, most of those are in the millions. And so frequently when we're competing with dollars, the limited dollars within the FAA, we're having to just basically roll over that $150,000 until we can fit in to that limited funding to fully fund a much-needed project for us.
Thank you. My time's almost about to expire. My mother used to tell me when I point my finger at somebody to blame them, if I point at the FAA, there's three pointing back at me. So Congress, I believe, is part of the problem, and it's the uncertainty that we, you know, whether it's sequestration, whether it's government shutdowns, whether we do short-term extensions. So Congress has to look at itself, and like I said, I got 5 former chairmen up there on the walls looking at me, and they were all part of bills that tried to reform FAA, just nipped around the edges. As far as I can tell, didn't do anything significant. So, and I think a big part of that is making sure that when you deploy your dollars, you have a process that's steady with certainty. So again, I appreciate you being here and appreciate you answering our questions and educating us. Thanks. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster. Mr. DeFazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to get to the core, I think we have some substantial agreement here on allowing an enhanced PFC and the needs it would address. But we do need to address, you know, I did study economics, but it would be useful to have other people counter the argument of Airlines for America, which is that there's absolute price elasticity. $2, $3 PFC, no one's going to fly anymore. $200 ticket change, no problem. $25 for bag, no problem. $50 for bag in the overhead, no problem. $2 PFC, no one will fly anymore. Anybody want to kind of address that, refute that? Yes, go.
So I think there was a GAO study that said that that's really not going to be an issue, and I would concur with your comments that it won't depress demand. I don't find that the airlines object to raising the PFC as much as they object to not having any control over what we use it for. And I think that in order to move the conversation forward, it would be helpful to involve them in some sort of consultative process about what we're going to use our money for. Most of the airlines that I talk to who operate out of our airport are desperate to have infrastructure more efficient and make more sense. And I am confident that as many people would fly out of Pittsburgh in the future as they do today, if not more, if we had a better airport with more air service that would be possible because of a locally imposed PFC.
And of course, you identified in particular, which the chairman was pointing to in a larger sense, the FAA, that the requirements for you to increase your PFC are just don't work for you, for your needs. I mean,
Well,
because they're
not
criteria.
as it's defined today, correct.
Yeah.
What we can use it for, we need that to expand.
Right.
Because we have enough capacity for a whole lot of years. That's not our issue. What we don't have is the right capacity, and we don't have efficient capacity.
All right. Mr. Massey and I accommodated that in our bill. We
Thank you.
removed that criteria. Anybody else want to comment on this?
Yeah.
I did go to A4A and say, how about if we tier it and they have to show a higher level of need to go to higher PFC or extraordinary need? And the answer was no. They just won't talk about it. So I would like to think that they would be willing to talk about something where they could have a little more input, but I think that that some of their members are afraid of the potential for more competition at certain airports. Mr.
I think.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I think one way that we can view it is that the airlines have found a way to offset the cost associated with baggage or other change fees that they have. And so they have found a way to offset it. So the other way we can look at it is that the airport needs to do the same thing. So we need to find a way to offset the costs associated with the infrastructure that we need to keep pace with the growth that's taking place in the industry. And that means our method of getting that done is through a PFC, uncapping the PFC. So I think that's one way of viewing it as well.
Does anybody, yes, Mr. Donahue.
The other perspective I'd offer, I mean, DFW supports a PFC increase for all the reasons my colleagues mentioned. But when I look selfishly at DFW, we just finished, we're about to finish a $3 billion capital program, and we probably have another $5 to $10 billion in capital requirements, infrastructure requirements moving forward. And the PFC is critical to help us, but it's not the silver bullet. I mean, it's a balanced solution. As an airport, we've got to perform better to generate more revenues that we put back into the airport. Infrastructure, I mean, I'm delighted to hear the infrastructure discussion going on. Probably I'm more excited, and when I hear it, I finally hear airports mentioned, and previously, when I heard infrastructure, I didn't hear airports, and obviously, I think the airports can add value in that discussion moving forward. P3s are an important vehicle. Obviously, we're going to continue to hit the bond market, and obviously, the airlines are going to continue to participate. So we support the increase in the PFCs. We appreciate the bill, but for an airport like DFW, it's bigger than just PFCs.
Sure.
We've got to look at a really balanced solution.
No, I get that, and that's like people who say P3s, private money will solve all our infrastructure problems. No, there's a lot of this is public infrastructure that cannot generate surplus revenues and needs federal investment, and we will continue the AIP program with a slight reduction under the plan we introduced. But I do really, you know, I'm not aware of any other alternative to help people do additional bonding. I mean, you know, the president has admitted that, you know, like LaGuardia and other places really need the investment, but he says he doesn't like fees. Well, I don't know what the alternative is. Someone's got to pay for it. I mean, if anyone has an alternative, let me know. So, but thank you for at least the comprehensive overlay.
Thank you, Mr. DeFazio. Is Mr. Rokita here? No. Then we go to Mr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one, Mr. Donahue, one quick clarification. This is just semantics. We're not increasing the PFC. We are giving you the freedom to set, or that's our intent, to set whatever PFC you want. You can lower it if you'd like. But anyways, what are some of the, I mean, we're using general terms, infrastructure. What are some of the specific projects, and I would ask Mr. Little and Ms. Casotis that as well. What are some of the specific projects that you would be doing if you could finance them that aren't being done And what's the implication or impact on customers and airlines? I'll go with you first.
Well, again, I recognize DFW, given our size, we are in a position where we will find a way, one way or the other, to fund our infrastructure projects. And again, we would prefer a more balanced solution than we have today. But when I look at our 45-year-old airport and the fact that we have terminals that are that age, and we have a couple of runways that are that age, and roads and bridges within the airport, I mean, we will have to do those projects. We will find a way to do those projects. But I think we can do it in a more balanced approach than we have in the past.
So roads, bridges, terminals?
Runways. Airfield operations, correct. But again, to answer your specific question, it's not an issue at DFW that we won't do them.
Understood.
We will find a way of doing it.
Understood. Mr. Little?
So specific projects, so International Arrival Facility, $660 million. North Satellite Facility Expansion, $550,000. Baggage Handling System, $320 million. South Satellite Renovation, yet to be determined. And that's just the current capital development program. In addition, we're doing a master plan. We have not finalized that master plan as yet, but the master plan is pointing to the need for an additional 34 gates. And so we're looking at an additional potentially $10 billion to complete that master plan. Could be higher, could be lower. We haven't finalized it as yet. Now, unlike maybe DFW, I agree that PFC is not the end-all. However, we have less flexibility because of the footprint that we have in terms of generating non-aeronautical revenues. And so the PFC, flexibility, as you said, with the PFC is extremely important to us, so we can use the PFC at whatever level we think is reasonable for the projects.
And why aren't you funding all that stuff right now with AIP?
Pardon?
Why aren't you funding all that right now with AIP?
Most of the projects that are AIP eligible are our runways and taxiways and projects. Most of the projects that we have in the future are actually gates and terminals, and not all of those projects are AIP eligible. And that's one of the major challenges that we have.
I got you.
We have finished all of our runway projects for the foreseeable future.
Ms. Casadas?
Yeah, so we, first of all, I have gates. If you need a couple, we're happy to ship them over. Yeah, can you pay me for them?
We've got some spare ones at CVG,
we're gonna
too.
work out a deal. Right away, we have a de-icing pad that needs to be upgraded. That's $13 million. We've got snow removal equipment that is 25 years old that needs to be replaced. We've got escalators, moving walkways, rehab that needs $16 million worth of work. But in the long term, what a PFC would allow us to do as part of a mix, as my colleagues have said, would an increase in the PFC would allow us to right-size and modernize our facility to be an origin and destination airport. We were built as a large connecting hub. So we have an X design. It's beautiful. It's brilliant, and I think it's the only one outside of Abu Dhabi that is as smart as it is. So that means that when passengers come off an international flight and they clear customs, most of those passengers used to just go to their gate. Well, if you were coming home, you had to go through TSA because you were airside, you were on the secure side. So when we became an O&D airport, origin and destination, and everybody was coming back into just Pittsburgh, they would line up at TSA to take off their belts and their shoes to go to the garage. That doesn't make sense. We have an inadequate Federal Inspection Services facility that needs a major upgrade. Our security checkpoint is too small, so we have two. So we have a major renovation that has to take place.
So very quickly, I know you wanted more flexibility, probably flexibility for all of the programs,
them.
but which gives you more flexibility, PFCs or AIP?
Neither. We need
Okay.
reforms to both. I need reforms to both, please. Our projects we're not capacity enhancing projects.
My goal was to ask everybody, but I'm out of time, so I'll yield back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I recognize Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Little, can you we talked about, in your testimony, you talked about the 4 revenue options. You didn't discuss and don't go into detail about how airports negotiate with airlines to contribute the capital facilities. But do you have estimates, since every airport is different, are there estimates of what airlines provide in this mix, say for SeaTac as an example?
Yeah, so we have actually done a financial forecast just based on the preliminary numbers that we have for the master plan. Again, we have not selected the preferred alternative as yet, but when we look at the alternative, that would be in about the $10 billion range. At a 450 PFC, if we do not have an increase in the PFC, by 2034, the cost per enplanement to the airlines would increase from approximately $10.15 today to $49, $50, and we think that would be unacceptable. I know I've heard that the airlines will pay, but I don't think they'll be willing to pay that much at any airport.
So from $10 estimated to $49 to $50?
Yes.
Under your current capital plan. Okay. And so the alternative, it's either out of the airline who presumably puts that into their fare,
So yeah, so if we do not have additional PFCs, and if we use bond, for example, go to the bond market, all of that goes into the rates and charges for the airlines.
Yeah. Okay. So can you talk a little bit about, and for Mr. Donahue as well, and Mr. Little, Mr. Donahue, you have American is largely the big dog at DFW, where at SeaTac you have Delta and Alaska and United and others as well, but largely Alaska and Delta, so some multiple carriers, let's call it. Can you two just briefly talk about what that means for operations and how you have to plan at the airport? Okay, Mr. Little, you go first.
Okay, it is very interesting because I think in the last use and lease negotiations, the primary airlines that was negotiated with was Alaska Airlines. Now Delta has grown significantly at airports, so we're actually currently, the use and lease agreement, what we call the slow agreement, expires at the end of this year. So we're in negotiations right now with multiple airlines, but of course the big players are Alaska and Delta. It's very challenging because we have a gate allocation methodology that basically favors an airlines that actually growing at the airport. So it favors one airline over the other. And the problem is we are constrained. We just do not have enough gates. During peak time, we cannot accommodate all the airlines at the airport. In fact, we are now doing hard stand operation. And as we try to get these CIP projects that I just mentioned, which will add additional gates, during that time, we will have to continue doing hard stand operations. So gates are our biggest issue, and that's the biggest challenge that we have negotiation with, not just Alaska and Delta, but American, Southwest, all the other airlines that we have at the airport.
Yeah. Mr. Donahue?
We are actually in discussions with American on the future master plan of the airport and adding a terminal and adding gates. And because American dominates DFW, probably shouldn't use the word dominate, it's the largest airline at DFW, they tend to invest in DFW because it's so important to them. But I would agree with Mr. Little's point. As we look at these infrastructure needs in the future, we are not supportive, nor do we want to see the cost per enplanement for passengers double or triple as we do these programs because the only solution is the bond market. Because I feel that then makes us uncompetitive as a hub versus other major hubs in the U.S. So that's why I think it's important that we continue to work with the airlines to find the right solution, as I said, to find a balanced solution so that we make the proper investments, but we have to pay just critical attention to making sure our costs don't get so out of whack that it's uncompetitive either in the U.S. or globally, because as you know, this is becoming more and more of a global aviation industry.
Thank you. Thanks. Yield back.
Mr. Rakita.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate you having this hearing. I appreciate listening to everyone's testimony. Unfortunately, the electronics here at the committee room aren't working. The IT is not working well today. I had two pictures, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to submit for the record. The first one was a picture of the work of my 6-year-old who has turned our basement into airport building. And he found a way to take my iPad and go on Google Maps and pick a different airport every week and build it in our basement. And just like some of the challenges you have, he is running out of space and is acquiring more land. So I wanted to get that in a record. I know he's only 6, but I'd like to get him some work when he's able, so I'm putting it in early. One of the issues that has come across my desk recently, perhaps a little bit off the target of this hearing, is this idea about general aviation access to airports. Of course, general aviation pays a gas tax fee, and in my opinion, it certainly pays for what we use of the system. Of course, airports are part of the system. I guess first to Mr. Little and Mr. Donahue, do you believe general aviation has a right to use your particular airports? Yes or no?
Yes, and they do currently.
Yes. And Mr. Little, for the record?
Yes, but we have limited GA services at the airport, but the answer
Yeah, I saw that. Let me go there. You have at SeaTac something called Aircraft Service International Group, which is now Signature.
Yes.
And I just checked, and they have something for what would be my general aviation airplane, a small light twin, a $15 fee that goes to you, and a $50 FBO fee that's waived if I buy 30 gallons. Now, that's the FBO charges that, and imagine the FBO Signature pays you a lease or a rent or something for the space. Is that correct?
Yes.
So they charge me $50, but if I buy 30 gallons, that fee gets waived. But the 100 low lead fee at SeaTac right now is $8.43 a gallon, which is more than double, or at least double, what Ms. Cosset's airport charges and what Mr. McNamee's airport charges. So my question, I guess, you acknowledge that there's a right for GA to use the airport. Is there any way to avoid these fees at SeaTac? More like a public park where if you paid an admission fee to get in, you can go tie down somewhere and not be charged $50, $15, or $8.43 a gallon.
That is something I'll have to look into. One of the big challenges we have at SeaTac Airport is space, not just only on the terminal side, but on the air side as well.
What did you say, space? I'm sorry.
Yeah, space. We're really constrained space-wise. Unlike DFW.
But you acknowledge we have a right to use the space.
Yes.
Right? Because we pay into the system. Okay. Mr. Donahue, same set of questions to you. Let's see. With DFW, you only charge $5 a gallon, which I find incredible, until there's a $75 non-waivable fee. I don't know if that goes to the corporate FBO you have. I don't know. Do you have is that a government-run thing, or is that a private entity? What is that?
We run our own corporate aviation.
Gotcha. So that probably explains a lower fuel per gallon fee, but $75 non-waivable, and then something for a landing fee as well. Same question to you then. Is there any way that I could go to DFW and waive these fees or tie down and not use the FBO or anything like that, or have any kind of access that doesn't require these fees?
Well, corporate aviation is a service we provide, Congressman, and it is not a priority for us because there's so many GA airports in the surrounding region. And
But hold on, I just premised this whole discussion by asking you an initial question, asking you if I had a right, if GA had a right to use your airport, and you said yes, definitely.
Correct.
So me using another airport isn't the question. I have a right to use your airport.
Correct.
But not unless we pay all these fees, correct? Even though we pay the gas tax.
That is correct.
Gotcha.
Those are the market rates, in our opinion.
That's the market rate. Market assumes competition.
And
You don't have two FBOs on the airport, do you?
Well, when I say competition, I'm referring to the other general aviation airports in our region.
Oh, what? Okay, but at your airport, I mean, a lot of airports have more than one FBO, so the record understands that, and the other members have understood. You don't, and the one FBO you have, you in fact own, you run for as part of the entity or the government, right? So in the 15 seconds I have remaining, I don't know if Mr. McNamee or wants to respond to this, but a lot of your customers are general aviation.
All of our customers are general aviation, and we actually have 4 FBOs at Camarillo alone and 2 at Oxnard.
Do you
So
believe general aviation, your customers have a right to go to the big airports?
They do, but as you know, airports like Camarillo, they're specifically designated as reliever airports to help minimize the congestion at those larger airports.
Yeah.
And much
This
the
isn't a
same as
congestion
DFW.
question, and it's not a safety question. We acknowledge that, I mean, there's a space issue, and there's an issue of not having so much gallonage and flowage and all that.
So as a general aviation pilot, I enjoy when I sometimes fly into those larger airports and are greeted with open arms, yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Mr. Larson for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask a unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the American Association of Airport Executives indicating support for the DeFazio Massey bill, and a letter from U.S. Travel Association indicating support for the DeFazio Massey bill.
Without objection, so ordered. Now we'd like to go to Ms. Bustos.
Thank you, Chairman Lobiando and Ranking Member Larson. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a few questions here. My congressional district in the northwest part of the state of Illinois has 3 international airports and more than a dozen general aviation facilities. So I certainly appreciate all the witnesses here today spending time with us and answering some of our questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Bleiweiss. You mentioned the economic impact of airports on smaller communities. If you could go into a little more detail on that, that would be helpful.
Thank you. I'm happy to. Airports or communities have to generate economic vitality, and one way that most companies look for to build up communities is with air service or by being able to bring companies in to those communities to generate jobs. So in Asheville, for example, again, 1,700 jobs are based not necessarily at the airport. The airport only has 450, 460 some odd jobs. But it's the influence of everything else that seeps into the community by doing so. We have been told a number of times when businesses are looking to expand or move to Western North Carolina, one of the first questions they're asked is, what kind of air service do you have, and what's the ability to get in new air service from the airlines? The unfortunate part that we have to deal with as smaller communities and smaller airports is, again, there's limited air service. There are 4 legacy carriers carrying almost 85% of the traffic in this country. They're looking at more of the bigger hubs. They're looking at airports as feeders, but they also don't provide a lot of good service to those feeders or for those hubs. So it's a limited about of how much capacity an airport will take. The growth that we have had in Asheville has to do with the ultra-low-cost carriers. They're the ones that are bringing our travelers to our communities, but those are also the type of airlines that businesses are not looking to use when they are growing the community employment base.
So just as a follow-up to that, and maybe this is probably broad, and maybe I'm get myself in trouble for asking it this broadly, but what additional resources can Congress provide to help smaller airports flourish?
I think, again, looking at the modernized or uncapped PFC helps the dollars flow from the larger airports down to smaller airports to expand their facilities. But also, again, as I touched on some of my things with the regulation of FAA, there are ways for airports to incentivize airlines to come into the communities. But the way that the FAA is looking at those rules and procedures limits what we can do. There's no reason why an airport shouldn't. If they are an economic vitality to that community, there's no reason why they should not be able to put some of their revenue dollars into incentivizing all airlines that want to serve and then bring in additional service to those communities. And right now, we can't do that. There's limiting factors when even in our chambers or our economic development communities or partners in our small communities want to attract airlines. Technically, right now, we're not even allowed to sit in on those conversations and guide our communities to what service that airport needs or what service the community needs. Those are some of the restrictions that the FAA should loosen up on and let us do our business as a private enterprise.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. McNamee, I was in your county with Congresswoman Brownley last summer, and it is lovely there. I want to ask you, you mentioned the Small Community Air Service Development Program. In addition to the infrastructure needs our airports face, Attracting and maintaining commercial air service can be a real challenge. Can you talk a little bit more about how communities use the program and what additional flexibility you would like to see?
Additional flexibility. So we are currently, we have in hand a small community air service development grant in the amount of $500,000 at Oxnard Airport. And we lost air service in 2010. That really was the airlines increasing the fares to the point where the Navy, we have a large Navy base there in Ventura County, which made up about a third of our customers, stopped using the service. And then from there, the fares got even higher for the local businesses and the business community traveling, and it basically killed the service. And so we've been trying to restore air service ever since. Even with that grant package in hand and great local community support, including funding, we've got about $1 million package. That has not been enough to incentivize some of those regional carriers. We don't have historical data to our strongest market, which would be the Bay Area. We have derived data based on traveling passengers, zip codes, things like that. So we know who's traveling out of LAX and Burbank instead of Oxnard. The program is a very good program. You know, it used to be funded at a much higher level. I think it's currently at $6 million a year. More funding would be nice to have for those small communities. They can definitely take advantage of it. In terms of flexibility, as Lou, my colleague next door here, mentioned, you know, we're often, our hands are tied in how we can exercise those programs. And so, for instance, we have a relatively strong reserve fund in our enterprise fund at the airport, but we're not allowed to spend airport money as part of that package for the grant. We have to go out and find it from outside sources, which fortunately we're able to do, but not all airports are in that position.
All right, thank you, Mr. McNamee. I've exhausted my time. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our panelists. One of the issues that's been brought to my attention by virtually all of the regional airports in and around my district relates to ensuring continued access to air service. And in smaller communities, that actually means access to pilots. Regional airports in the communities I serve, like Bloomington, Normal, Champaign-Urbana, and Springfield, Illinois, enable them to connect globally and have significant importance to the businesses and institutions in those regions. But unfortunately, according to the U.S. Travel Association, 2/3 of states, like Illinois, have seen declines in both the number of flights and the number of routes since 2007. And since 2013, nearly 40 small airports across the country have lost commercial service altogether. And since I'm not going to massacre your last name, I'm going to call you Mr. Lou. So Mr. Lou is an executive director of a regional airport. What ideas and suggestions do you have quickly, because I only have a little amount of time and more questions, what can you do, what are your ideas to halt this trend?
I think looking at the regional carriers and on what they're trying to base, you know, as the small airplanes are being phased out of manufacturing and use, they're becoming large airports or larger airplanes, which makes it difficult to support a small community with a 70 or a 90, 100-seat airplane when it's really meant for a 35 to a 50-seat airplane. We were subject to that this summer. We have one of our legacy carriers decided to stop flying one of our early morning routes out of our airport, and it was blamed on pilot shortage. We have no facts whether that was accurate or not. The flight came back in September, and we haven't had an issue yet. But it is a serious issue for airports all around the country of whether airlines are really really have that issue, whether it's a pilot shortage, whether it's a pay situation, union situation, whatever. So we just don't have all the facts and know where it's going.
All right. Any ideas what can we do to ensure that we don't lose service then?
Trying, and again, being able to work with your communities, trying to work with airlines to bring in different types of services, different airlines. There are smaller airlines that are coming into play. The legacies don't necessarily want to do it, but there are other types of carriers out there to do that. So it's just a matter of, again, having FAA loosen up some of the abilities for us to use incentive dollars or other type of marketing dollars to be able to, work with airlines and bring them into your communities.
All right, my next question is going to be like a Jeopardy game. Whoever hits the button first can get to answer this. Language in the FAA Authorization Act of 1994 sought to limit the diversion of revenues generated at airports. Unfortunately, a loophole in that law has been used to get around our congressional intent. So last Congress, during the debate of the AIR Act, I co-sponsored an amendment that would have ensured that that revenue raised at an airport remain at the airport and is used for airport purposes. I'll open it up. Do you believe ensuring that these taxes remain at the airport is fair? And would it help you do a better job of investing in your aviation infrastructure if that were the case?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Casotis?
Yes.
Got yeses?
Definitely.
Yes.
Anybody want to care to explain why?
We're already struggling to take care of the infrastructure needs that we have if there were any revenue diversion. And we're one of the 3 airports in the United States, along with DFW and Denver, where we have an agreement with the ability to pull gas out of the ground, right? We sit on a large tract of land, and we have the ability for revenue that a lot of other airports don't have, and we're putting all of it towards debt repayment and infrastructure. That's where it goes.
So what are some of the expenses that this revenue is used for rather than reinvesting in airport infrastructure?
For me, it's about paying down the debt.
Okay,
That's it.
all right.
And at DFW, we reinvest everything back into infrastructure at the airport.
Okay. Are there any of you that serve municipalities that maybe take that money and use it for other purposes? All right. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you all.
Ms. Norton? You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this series of hearings you've been holding. I'm a new co-chair of something called the Quiet Skies Caucus. That may be that name may be the self-evident or convey the self-evident understanding that airplane noise has become a national issue, and it's a bipartisan issue here in the Congress. Of course, my own airport is Reagan National Airport. I also am aware that there are a number of contributing factors. For example, we had manufacturers here, and they discussed quieter planes. Just, I believe it was last week. And of course, there's the controversy over next gen or the new flight procedures. And then there's early morning and late night planes. I would call those the 3 major causes of the concern of members from coast to coast, I must tell you, about airplane noise. I wonder, Mr. Donahue, because I read in your testimony, and I commend you, because there's a line in your testimony that says, outboard runways are typically closed from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's a much more reasonable hour than, for example, we have at Reagan National, where as late as 1 a.m. planes can go, and before 5 a.m., because you can imagine what that must mean in some neighborhoods. When did you go to 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.? And has that time frame had any negative effects on airplane operations? Was the FAA involved? How you decided to go to those hours?
Okay, thank you, Congresswoman, for the question. Just to clarify, we do not have a curfew at DFW Airport. What we have is the luxury of 7 runways.
You
so
have
the fact
you don't have a curfew, so 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. is because of what?
that's just an operational decision we've made because
You've always had that.
I'll have to let you know. I've only been at DFW 3 years, but
I wish you would.
we'll let you know. But we have the flexibility because of 7 runways to use our inboard runways for overnight operations, and we just think that's the right thing to do from a community
Well,
perspective.
does that mean that it's from your community?
Because we're on a footprint that's about 17,000 acres, we have about 800,000 operations a year at DFW, and I think we had maybe 400 to 500 noise complaints. So we
So
average
it's the
less.
size of the of the airport that helps you.
It does. It
I
does, the
see.
size and the flexibility we have with the runways.
Of course, this is a major airport that you represent. I have one more question on the so-called DBE program, and that is the inclusion of minorities and women in the construction of and renovation of airports. I think this is probably best for Mr. Donahue and Mr. Little. This committee has only recently reaffirmed in its reauthorization of the FAA its commitment to the inclusion of minorities and women in this work. Now, the Inspector General in his report cited the bundling of major construction and concession contracts to a single contractor as a barrier to women and minorities becoming a part of airport construction. So I'd like to ask you if you have had any experience with this approach, that is to say bundling. Do you understand how that would almost per se or automatically exclude small business and minority and women-owned business, and what do you think can be done about it?
We do not bundle, Congresswoman, at DFW, and we have a very, very strong commitment to our minority and women-owned partners in the community. Last year, on the expenditure or construction side, we had about $200 million to minority and women-owned businesses, and on the concessions or revenue side, we had about $150 million. So we have a very strong program. We're committed to it. We work with our partners in the community, and we will continue to focus on those programs. Thank you.
My goodness, Mr. Little?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've been discussing because we have specific challenges in Washington State with I-200, et cetera.
You have specific challenges?
Challenges with I-200.
With DBEs in particular?
Well, if we have a project that has grants associated with it, then we can set DBE goals. If not, we can't based on state laws. But one of the things
I'm sorry, you'll have to explain that.
There's a state law that we have in Washington State called I-200, which prevents us from setting those goals. It's specific to the state of Washington.
Could he just complete his answer, Mr. Chairman?
Pardon?
Have you completed your answer?
No, I'm not finished.
Okay, try to wrap it up, please.
Okay. I'll stop there, sorry. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would concur with the ranking member, Mr. Larson, that Alex Haley's Airport 1968 novel was a great read. But the movie in 1970, filmed at Minneapolis, St. Paul, was even better. So if you don't know by now, I represent Minnesota. And MSP, which is a great airport, like many of yours, does have capital infrastructure needs. They estimate $1.7 billion needed over the next 7 years to keep up with operational needs. The fees they've collected over the past 4 years, $80 million from PFCs, $4 million only in federal grants. Obviously, they have other revenue streams, but you start to see the task ahead for MSP in the country in what is needed on infrastructure in our airport. So my question on the PFCs, and we'll start with Mr. Donahue here. So we've raised the cap. Obviously, we're going to get more revenue, but one justification has been it will promote more competition. Can you tell me or get more specific on how it would, as opposed to the airlines currently serving your cities just getting a bigger market share?
Well, again, while we support the increase in PFCs, we have a situation at DFW similar to Minneapolis, Congressman, that you have a carrier that probably has, at DFW, American has 80% plus of our traffic. So to argue from a DFW perspective that a PFC increase would drive more competition at DFW would be difficult to make that argument given just the market situation at our airport.
Mr. Little?
Yeah, I think well, I know it definitely will. We are extremely gate constrained. We are out of gates. We have no more gates. And during peak, we just cannot accommodate whether it's domestic or international airlines that wants to operate at the airport. And so with the additional funding sources from an increase in the PFC, we can build these additional gates, both domestic gates and international gates.
That you think would go to newer entrants?
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. We have airlines that would like to come to the airport now, but the time that they would want to come to the airport, they can't because there's no gates available.
And what about Pittsburgh?
We have plenty of gates available, and we welcome anybody who can serve our community well. That's not our issue. I mean, if anything, we've got 75 gates, and 25 of them on any given day are sitting idle. That's 25 gates that we're not using that are going to be obsolete soon and would have to go through. I mean, even if we wanted to preserve that infrastructure, it wouldn't be used by the time the airlines wanted to use it.
There does seem to be unanimity of opinion, and certainly my view, that I'm kind of a user fee guy anyway, so I like this idea to some degree, but clearly more revenue is needed for infrastructure. That's why we're here. That's why we're holding these hearings. But I'm wondering if there are other methods of getting at some of the revenue, and this one's near and dear to my heart. There's a study that shows that the ticket tax obviously does not apply to baggage now. So naturally, the flights are just more fun than ever. Such fees, if you went back to the old model where it's embedded in the ticket, might raise about $264 million nationwide. Now, given our needs, that isn't much, but is it worth considering? Anybody? Yes, Ms. Blues.
Congressman, I think all funding sources are important, depending on where they come from. Increase of the PFC does multiple things, but you've got to remember that airports, just like airlines, somewhat are limited to competition. I know when you get a little further out west, you have further distances between airports, but on the East Coast, there are choices that passengers can make. So by uncapping a PFC provides opportunities for airports to have infrastructure dollars. We have to be careful of what we do with those PFC dollars because we can't set those at a rate that would drive our community to other airports to use those to save money.
But what about the ticket tax on ancillary charges?
And I think, since the airlines have unbundled, I think any way to put money into the trust fund, including those, is just additional funding opportunities to help support the infrastructure needs to the airports in this country.
Thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Hey, Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit towards UAS integration. And obviously, UAS integration into our national airspace has become a major issue over the last decade. But I know, Mr. McNamee, in our county, you have been undertaking a lot in this area. And if you could just talk a little bit about what you are doing and the progress you're making.
Yeah, so it is a dilemma that the FAA has been wrestling with, the proliferation of UAS. The technology is so good and it's so inexpensive that just about everybody and anybody owns a small drone nowadays. And so the concern, of course, is operating those around airports, in particular for this panel here. And so the FAA has stood up what's called the Drone Advisory Committee. That's a working committee. They've met twice now, and they have some subcommittees working primarily on establishing responsible yet reasonable regulations and policies, and then also trying to define the responsibilities of the different levels of government. For instance, you may not be able to expect local law enforcement to enforce a federal aviation regulation. So those are some of the things we're dealing with. We've been involved in that conversation in Ventura County for a long time. Our sheriff operates a UAS to supplement their other aviation assets. And out at the airport, again, we want to be a model on how to safely integrate those around airports. And we have been now, for 6 months or so, operating a small UAS simultaneously with general aviation traffic. We're not closing the Class Delta airspace to do it, and it's working very well.
Is that with the county sheriffs or?
Oh, no, that's on behalf of the airport. We're using a small UAS now to increase our efficiencies on the ground in terms of facility inspection, perimeter security, wildlife monitoring, things like that.
Very good. Thank you very much. And last year, our committee spent a great deal of time considering legislation that would have created a private corporation to manage our air traffic control system. So could you talk a little bit about what you think privatization would have on our contract tower program and also on general aviation airports?
Certainly, there's a concern for small airports. The concern would be that if it's a government corporation, that there may be profit motive, and that smaller airports might be in jeopardy, particularly their towers. Representation on the board, making sure that an airport has a seat on the board. But really, that's the concern, is that the airlines would have a much larger say in how the air transportation system works, the network in the sky, and it potentially jeopardizes small airports. The drafts I've seen seem to provide some good protections for small airports, which I very much appreciate.
Very good, thank you. And one last question is, do you know the average pilot pay for regional airline pilots nationwide and locally? Do you believe that paying entry-level pilots more would or could mitigate the pilot shortage?
It will certainly help. I think what you've found, and this is what we've experienced at Oxnard Airport, and it was mentioned by one of my colleagues, but a reduction in fleet at the regional size aircraft, and then workforce development to generate the number of pilots that we need going into the future. You have a large wave of retirements coming based on that mandatory 65-year or age retirement for pilots. And so we do a lot of workforce development locally there in Ventura County. Our flight schools have partnerships with some of the regional carriers to help develop pilots and feed that line. But certainly pay seems to be one of those issues where you normally or traditionally have a feeder system going through the regionals into the main lines. Pilots that now qualify to fly for either tend to jump that regional feeder and go right to the main lines because they can be paid more there.
Any other solutions that you have for?
Again, we facilitate and collaborate with our local partners in Ventura County. We're now teaching high school kids on operating UAS and providing ground school, as the Office of Education there at the airport is doing. So workforce development efforts to try and increase that number of pilots for the future of aviation is something that we hold dear to our heart.
Thank you very much. I yield back my balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, panel, for being here. So I'm a little interested in the conversation y'all were having with Mr. Davis next to me here in the context of PFCs and AIP. Now, each of you, from the looks of it or sounds of it, I'm just looking at where you each represent. I'm thinking, certainly, Mr. Donahue, you have a very different experience. I've been to your airport, but I'm from around South Central Pennsylvania, and we've got Harrisburg International, which is struggles, and probably, I'm thinking we could probably fit maybe 6 or 10 of them in your terminal footprint. I'm not sure, and it includes the runway. But that having been said, this conversation about PFCs, AIP, and how we fund some of the projects and the infrastructure maintenance, et cetera, that we have, and potential changes. I think, our local airport there struggles, obviously, to bring in carriers and maintain them, yet people that live in the area don't want to have to travel to this area to fly. And I'm wondering, especially is it Bleiweiss? Is that how you pronounce that? And maybe Mr. McNamee, probably Ventura County is probably fairly large too, but maybe, Allegheny County, that's in SeaTac, that's out of the program for us too. But I'm looking for some perspective on a smaller airport, how these changes, if you can kind of envision that, and maybe it's asking you to stick up for your competition, right, to a certain extent, but how they would affect, how changes would affect some of our smaller airports and their ability to stay in business and provide that service, trying to get out of the perspective where we continually subsidize and fund them, and which also draws money away from the bigger airports that need it as well. So just give me some thoughts on that.
Great question, Congressman. I think allowing airports, again, to look at their non-aeronautical land, looking at being able to develop and bring in other types of businesses that will fund revenue into the airport, will help relieve some of the lacking of AIP or the current PFC levels. Just a matter of how much land an airport has. But again,
Are there currently prohibitions?
No, but there are a lot of hurdles, so to speak, to be able to develop land at an airport, whether it's federally obligated or not. You still have to go through the FAA process to be able to develop that land and get their permission.
And that has nothing to do with like the clear zone or anything like that?
Not
That's
at
just
all.
an airport?
Not at all. I recently, within the last few years, put a gas station convenience store on my property. It's bringing revenue to the airport, and I had to go through the FAA to get permission to do that before I could even have a conversation with them about moving a lease forward. So just again, it's not federally obligated land, but yet they still dictate how we control it. Understand the safety aspects, and that's
Sure.
very important. But some of the properties that are not near the airfield or not near, anything that has an aeronautical purpose should be left up to the airport to run the business like a private business and be able to generate revenue as we are required to do to be self-sufficient as possible.
I would concur, and maybe we could look at that in any modifications we do. Ms. Casas, do you have any?
We have about 3,800 acres of land to be developed, and fortunately, we have a great relationship with Harrisburg, with the ADO, so we move our projects through quickly, but it does take time, and there is quite a bit of work to be done to demonstrate that you are at fair market value and that the use is frankly concurrent with something that the FAA would approve for the land. So anything we can do to streamline that process helps.
Let me just, skipping around here a little bit to a different topic with a little bit of time left, and Ms. Brownlee brought it up. I'm trying to do some work on the UAS industry. We're worried, or concerned, maybe is a better word, that without some of the infrastructure in place, that the development and manufacturing of that keeps on being pushed out of the country because we're just not up to speed. Now, this is probably more an issue for the people doing the flying is in the traffic system, management system. But from your perspective, she asked you your concerns as facilities managers, and Mr. McNamee, you talked about that a little bit. But I would suspect you would support some type of an integrated system for all UAS variants, because, everybody wants to fly them, but they want to be the only one doing it and don't let anybody else do it, right? But I just wanted to get, if there's any other perspective I'm missing from a facility standpoint that you guys would have.
So I'll field that one. So really, you do have the Drone Advisory Committee working closely with the FAA, and I believe they're going to help provide some solutions. You have other great minds in NASA looking to implement an unmanned traffic management system. And so you do have UAS of all sizes. Honestly, now most of the large UAS, they fly very much like a manned aircraft. They file an IFR flight plan or an instrument flight plan and go off and do their work. And there just aren't that many of them. It's the proliferation of the small guys at low altitude, especially around airports where aircraft are arriving and departing, that is of most concern to us. And you've got some great minds working to find ways to, through policy, create safe zones around airports and technology coming online to help with that, with the detect and avoid and things like that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me see. To the panel, I'm sure history and a long history of discrimination in contracting at airports is been obvious, especially in construction and the concessions. Airports are asking, Congress to raise the PFC, but these funds are not required to meet DOT's DBE requirements. Since the PFC funds don't have this requirement, how are we to be sure that DBE businesses will have a fair shot at the lucrative contracts that will likely spring up from our raising of the PFC? Mr. Donahue.
Well, from a DFW airport perspective, we have policies in place that dictate and provide what we are going to do to continue to support our minority and women-owned businesses. We set goals every year that our board of directors have to approve. We report out to our board of directors on a frequent basis on how we're doing in terms of minority and women-owned participation. And as I said before, we have a very strong program, and we want to continue to strengthen it. But the biggest issue, or I think to answer your question, it's the oversight of our board of directors.
Okay. Salou?
So we're setting more and more aggressive DBE, small business targets. But to answer the question directly, if you look at the trend and what we're asking for, more of the dollars associated with construction projects, if we're successful in getting the PFC cap raised, will be associated with PFC versus AIP. And you're correct. Currently, there is no DBE requirements associated with the PFC because it's not federal dollars; it's local dollars that's being collected. And I think that's something we should take a look at.
Okay, thank you.
So we, like DFW, our board of directors every year approves our DBE, WBE, and MBE plans, and we monitor that. We do a lot of work in diversity outreach to our community in order to get more participation. But we have aggressive goals, and on every single project, we monitor and often exceed them.
Congressman, we also approve and look at our goals every year. But with smaller airports, the PFC is basically is combined with federal AIP dollars. So we're pretty much, even though we're not, most of our PFC dollars are put into projects that would be used with federal grants. So we would still be obligated to the DBE requirements because it's a combination of funding, not just using PFC dollars for separate standalone projects.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. Let's see. Newark Liberty International Airport is in my district and has some of the highest average ticket prices in the country. No doubt this is due in part to the constraints on facilities. That is a lack of gates or slots, I guess they're called. Can the panel speak to how the lack of slots translates to higher ticket prices, those that of you that have that issue? Would you say that the raising the PFC could possibly lead to decreases in ticket prices due to more competition?
From a DFW perspective, we do not have any slot constraints. The other competitive dynamic we have at DFW is Love Field, and the Wright Amendment was just repealed about two years ago, which has created more competition, which has also created lower fares. So from the DFW region perspective, we don't have that issue in terms of slot constraints and what they could do to pricing.
As I said, one of our major challenges that we have at SeaTac is gates. And so we have airlines that would like to provide service at our airport, but we just can't accommodate them, especially during peak, because we do not have the gate. And so the answer to your question is yes. I think there is a possibility that if we can add these additional gates and we have additional airlines, then the prices may very well go down.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I guess my time is up, and I yield back.
I'd like to recognize, we're going to go to Mr. Sanford, but before we do that, Mr. Larson for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from Airports Council International representing its support for the DeFazio Massey bill.
Without objection, so ordered, and you have a couple questions for the record.
And second, I'll be entering two questions for the record, one on NextGen for DFW and one for SeaTac regarding the work it's done on its environmental footprint, but we'll enter those into the record and expect answers back. Thank you.
Ms. Sanford.
I thank the Chairman. And I'll be brief. in deference to my colleague from California, I had come in, laid down a marker, and unfortunately I had another hearing I had to attend, so I apologize that I wasn't here for the bulk of your testimony. I appreciate y'all's time. You know, I probably be, at least by way of philosophy, on the dissenting view on increasing any tax fee or other. And I'd just like to explore just for a little bit, and for instance, at Dallas-Fort Worth, if you look at your alternatives, let's say the fee wasn't raised, what would you then do? What would be the next step in terms of where you would look in terms of capital markets or other in supplanting those needs?
Sure. In terms of DFW, Congressman, if the PFC was not raised, as we look at future infrastructure needs, the airlines would wind up paying the majority of it through our bond issuances, and the airlines pay the debt on those bond issuances. Now, again, from an airport perspective, we're fortunate that non-aeronautical revenues are strong.
Can I respectfully, what I'd argue is ultimately airlines don't pay it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a consumer that pays all this stuff because the cost is not borne by the airline and it's not borne by the local municipality. It's ultimately passed on to the consumer. So, but I hear you. Keep going. I'm sorry.
And I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying the mechanism within the airport is they would pay higher fees. In terms of our performance from a non-aeronautical perspective, where we gain revenues not from the airlines but other sources, we would have to step up our performance there because all of those revenues we invest back into the airport. As we discussed earlier, I think any discussions around infrastructure and any type of opportunities there would afford us an opportunity. P3s.
I guess, again, in just a couple minutes that I have, maybe somebody else has an illumination on this front. I mean, there's no closed system that doesn't have inefficiency built into it. And I would guess, what, it's less than 20% of your revenue source? Probably much less than that. What's PFC right now for you all?
PFC at DFW is about $130 million a year.
And the percentage of total would be what?
Out of $900 million in revenues.
So it's, I'm brain dead at this point in the day, so 5%. Is that right? 100? No.
No, it's
20%.
10 to 15.
Yeah. So it's shy of the 20% number. So somehow you're able to navigate the other water for the other 80%. Again, what are other alternatives to raising that fee that might be viable? Maybe something that's been done in another country where they've looked at some other creative alternative financing vehicle to getting at the needs that you're after, without ultimately raising yet another tax on airlines that's borne by the consumer. Is there anybody else out there that has, hey, yeah, I heard of this. They do this in Australia, or they do this in Canada, or they do this in Europe. Is there something else out there?
Well, from a global perspective, Congressman, certainly there are examples of other countries who, from a government perspective, support their aviation industry. I don't think you're going down that path, but that happens. It clearly happens in other parts of the world. And again, I think infrastructure, whatever happens from an infrastructure perspective moving forward, I think offers us an opportunity. And but I'm not aware of any other examples that U.S. airports have not tapped.
I guess what I'm getting at is doesn't it always? I mean, it just strikes me that different. To your point, in Pittsburgh, different local areas will choose enhancements or growth or to be a hub. They'll go about competition for that, and because it plays to that local region or that local area's advantage, we want to add all kinds of different bells and whistles, but we want to pass it on to the general flying public, though they may or may not go in and out of that airport. I mean, in some of this, it's local development borne by the general traveling public. Is that not the case, or you would take exception to that?
I would take exception to that. I would
I'm sure
say
you
that
would.
because the people that are paying that PFC or contributing to the program are people coming into and out of Pittsburgh. They're not connecting. We don't have a choice. The airlines made that choice, and it was the right choice for their business model. But No, I think that the people who,
I'd be rude and cut you off just because I know I don't want to. Or can she finish the question?
Well, I don't want to cut off in the middle, but we.
Yeah. In fairness to my
Remember.
colleague. Thank
Gentleman-
you very much for your time.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for another committee commitment earlier, too, so I'm pleased to be able to take part. Mr. McNamee, I'm from the northern part of the state. We have two of our main hub airports are Chico and Redding, and so we've probably faced similar circumstances to smaller to mid-size airports with keeping passenger service as well. So Redding's been doing okay. They've managed to maintain lately. Chico has been without commercial service since August of 2014, even though they had 16,000 boardings in that most recent year. So I guess what I'm getting at is what more, you've worked with Oxnard there with trying to get that back in place as well. And so with the access to the Small Community Air Service Grant Program, the commercial service has still eluded you in Oxnard. So what kind of strategies could do you apply to try and get that service back? I mean, is it really the way the airport operates, the improvements of the airport, or is it just flat come down to the economics and passenger convenience? Or do the passengers want to buy the tickets there?
No, it's...
What kind of things are really the most helpful to get that back in place?
Thank you, Congressman. So at Oxnard, we're uniquely situated just under 60 miles from LAX and from Burbank and from Santa Barbara to the north.
How far is Santa Barbara?
About 50 miles, 46 miles, I think, from Oxnard. Ventura County is a county of 1 million people. I would say about 600,000 of those folks should be using Oxnard Airport. It's a smaller runway. It's 5,500 feet for landing and only 100 feet wide. So we're not looking to bring mainline carrier-size aircraft. So we're really focused on the regional fleet. And the regional fleet is retiring more aircraft than they are bringing in new aircraft. And so it's difficult to find an airline with aircraft that are available to serve new routes, particularly ones that are not proven, such as Oxnard to the Bay Area, which, based on data, on market data, shows to be our strongest market if you combine San Jose, Oakland, and San Francisco.
Let me ask on that. Is it the newer type of commuter jets are having a bigger challenge than, say, the turboprops from before? Is that an aspect that you were just...
Most of your regional carriers are now retiring the twin-engine turboprops, which are what used to serve Oxnard, and the 50-seat regional jets are less efficient, so as fuel prices go up, they tend to use those less. And frankly, when you're feeding into a major hub airport, say San Francisco, when you have to occupy a gate with a 50-passenger jet versus a 200-passenger jet, it just doesn't work as well for that airport. And so Oxnard is open for 70 and 90 seat size aircraft. We could accommodate that. But again, the airlines are risk adverse, and so they're very careful where they put the limited number of aircraft they have available into which markets. So it's been a real challenge for us.
Okay, so that without that service, you must be having a very difficult time maintaining the facilities in a position to...
So luckily, we operate a system of 2 airports in Ventura County, and so I'm able to move funds from Camarillo Airport, where we have a large business park as well. And the business park alone generates about 35% of our revenue for the 2 airports. And so we do have the money to meet local match on federal grants for those infrastructure projects that needed at both airports. And then we do have money in the bank when we do those projects that are non-eligible to enhance the facility.
The airport improvement program can be quite helpful for smaller airports like that, but the $150,000 per year cap, how much of a hindrance is that, especially if there's more revenue available to spread around? How important is that cap in hindering what you might do to become more
So
attractive.
if you were to look at some of the documents I submitted, in particular to the grants that have been awarded Ventura County, we've rolled over that $150,000 for 2 years at Camarillo and at least 1 year at Oxnard and probably another year coming, because frankly, it's just not enough money to do a meaningful project. And
They at least allow you to roll it over and accrue it then, though.
we do, and the biggest problem is competing with other airports in the region for the limited AIP funding that's there. So we actually stagger some of our projects to fit in. You know, we had a big push with the FAA and the runway safety areas in 2015. That gobbled up tens of millions of dollars in our region. And so those turned out to be rather lean years for Camarillo and Oxnard. As we get past that now, we have a substantial project this year with some new underground infrastructure and taxi lanes, but then we've got major runway rehabilitations coming for both airports. And I think that's something you're going to see at a lot of airports that are older facilities where it's just that cycle. The runways are at the end of their useful life. So I think in small general aviation and small commercial service airports, you're going to see more and more runway reconstruction coming in the near years.
So the cap is an issue, yes or no?
It is.
Okay.
The short answer is yes, it's an issue.
Okay, thank you. Time's out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have one question for anyone on the panel. Many airport safety research programs are conducted at the FAA's flagship technical center, which is in my district. Are there any safety issues at our airports or in the national airspace system that you can think of that the committee should be aware of? And if so, how are they being addressed by the aviation community and the FAA? This is for anybody who may choose to take it. They're all jumping up at once.
Chairman, I think the FAA does a tremendous job with the safety side of aviation, and I'm not aware of any safety issues that are not being addressed appropriately.
Everybody else feels, yes, sir.
Certainly on the general aviation side of things, I think you're finding the certification process for general aviation aircraft, avionics, things like that, streamlining that process while still maintaining a level of safety, I think is very important for general aviation in its future.
Yeah, that's high up on our list to address with this reauthorization.
I would just say, Chairman, that the FAA continues to do an excellent job from a safety perspective. You know, having worked overseas, we do have the safest aviation system in the world, no doubt about it. But most importantly, I think we all agree that we're not complacent about that, and we know we can continue to do better and invest in better use of technology. But they're a very good partner from a safety perspective.
Okay. I'd like to thank our witnesses very much. I think this was very helpful for us. We appreciate your time and energy and your contribution to our effort here, and the committee stands adjourned.